that coronation, and they were furious. And not only that, Kate and William were angry too. And that anger, of course, Harry was angry, that anger went right through that small part of the congregation by the throne, by the center of Westminster Abbey.
Within the ancient stone walls of Westminster Cathedral, where centuries of prayers have soaked into every surface and light filters through stained glass like colored memories, the British royal family assembled on a September day in 2025 to honor Catherine, Duchess of Kent, a woman who had lived 92 years of quiet dedication to the crown. Her death closed a chapter.
As it's been announced that the Duchess of Kent, the cousin of Queen Elizabeth and wife of the Duke of Kent, has died. She was 92.
But what unfolded during her memorial service would rip open wounds that had barely begun healing within the Windsor family. As incense smoke curled upward and voices rose in sacred hymns during this historic Catholic funeral, the first of its kind for royalty in generations, attention should have remained fixed on remembering a life well lived. Instead, every eye in that cathedral eventually tracked toward a single frozen moment. Prince Andrew, stripped of his titles and cast to the family's margins, directed a look toward Catherine, Princess of Wales, that witnesses would later describe as chilling, cold, deliberate, a stare that seemed to pierce through all pretense of family unity. It lasted only seconds, yet those seconds felt suspended in ice, sending visible discomfort rippling through assembled mourners. This was not accidental awkwardness. This carried the weight of resentment that had been building behind closed palace doors. But the real shock was still coming. Within days of this tense cathedral scene, Prince William, the steady heir who rarely shows his hand publicly, made a move so decisive it left royal watchers stunned. He effectively banished his uncle from key family occasions, starting with the cherished Christmas gathering at Sandringham. This was not a polite suggestion. This was a boundary drawn in permanent ink. William had made clear that threatening his wife, even through a hostile glance, would carry consequences that echoed through the highest levels of the monarchy. As news of this bold action spread globally, questions multiplied faster than answers. What drove that venomous look from Andrew during a funeral meant to honor someone else's memory? How did it expose the fractures running through a royal family already weakened by scandal after scandal? And by exerting such influence over his father, King Charles III, has William not only protected those closest to him, but signaled his vision for a monarchy with far less tolerance for those who refuse to fall in line. This incident, playing out against the backdrop of grief and centuries-old ritual, pulls back layers to reveal a family where loyalty functions as currency and betrayal extracts the highest price. For Catherine, who carries herself with remarkable composure despite constant scrutiny, that stare represented more than rudeness. It was a reminder that dangers still lurk in corridors of power, shadows cast by Andrew's damaged reputation and lingering presence. Yet in William's swift response, we witnessed a protector shaped by personal battles, from his own complicated relationship with media to the unwavering support he provides Catherine through her health struggles. As details emerge from sources close to the palace, the full weight of this confrontation sharpens into focus, revealing not just family drama, but a fundamental shift in the monarchy's delicate balance. Could this mark the moment when the younger generation truly seizes control, cutting away what no longer serves to ensure the institution's survival? Or does it risk deepening the cracks that threaten centuries of carefully maintained tradition? That stare may have silenced the cathedral for a moment, but William's countermove has set royal narratives on fire, forcing everyone to look toward a future where compassion yields to clear boundaries. A funeral that became a flashpoint. The atmosphere inside Westminster Cathedral carried unusual weight that September morning, heavy with beeswax and centuries of accumulated history. Catherine, Duchess of Kent, had lived as more than a minor royal figure. Her 1994 conversion to Catholicism, a deeply personal choice, made this funeral service unprecedented in modern Windsor history. King Charles III walked at the procession's head, his attendance a meaningful gesture toward the interfaith understanding his reign has tried to build. The choir's performance of classical compositions seemed to reach toward heaven itself, prayers set to music. Yet the reconciliation those hymns suggested felt impossibly distant when Prince Andrew arrived. He came accompanied by his former wife, Sarah Ferguson, their joint appearance turning heads among the crowds gathered outside. For the Duke, whose public presence since his 2022 removal from military honors and royal patronages has been limited to only the most intimate family occasions like his parents' funerals, this appearance carried significance. Some insiders suggested his attendance at this memorial for a distant family connection by marriage was no coincidence. It represented a calculated attempt to reclaim some appearance of normalcy, to stand among family as though the Epstein associations and serious allegations were simply unfortunate footnotes in an otherwise acceptable story. But normalcy remained stubbornly out of reach. As royals filed into position, Andrew and Ferguson, both 65 and remarkably inseparable despite their long-ago divorce, drew audible reactions from observers who had grown accustomed to his near-total withdrawal to Royal Lodge. Queen Camilla's last-minute absence due to illness only heightened the existing tension, creating a vacuum that Andrew's presence seemed determined to occupy. Photographs captured the scene with brutal honesty. Andrew dressed in formal black, moving past security barriers with police escort, his face arranged in practiced solemnity. Yet beneath that mask, those who know palace dynamics detected something else: defiance, a refusal to simply disappear. This marked Andrew's first significant appearance alongside working royals since his spectacular fall, and it carried undercurrents of challenge. For William and Catherine, positioned prominently with their children, this service was meant to celebrate a life of understated service. The Duchess had represented the monarchy's gentler aspects, her support of arts and quiet charitable work, offering counterbalance to the family's more dramatic moments. But Andrew's proximity transformed reverence into tension. As the Requiem Mass progressed with a Scottish piper echoing laments that had marked Queen Elizabeth II's own farewell, attention kept drifting from the altar to the pews. Andrew, positioned directly behind the Wales family in the post-service procession, loomed like an unwelcome ghost. Whispered conversations spread among attendees, from fellow aristocrats to international religious dignitaries, all noting the awkward optics. Was Andrew extending an olive branch, or was this a calculated reminder of his bloodline connections that nobody could erase? Palace sources later indicated that invitations had gone out with expectations of quiet, dignified attendance. Yet Andrew's decision to arrive with Ferguson, who has never been shy about drawing attention, added a layer of spectacle that clashed sharply with the day's somber purpose. Within the cathedral's vaulted silence, where even the softest sound seemed amplified, this gathering of fractured family branches exposed the monarchy's ongoing internal struggle. How to honor tradition's demands while answering modern calls for accountability. For a family whose strength has always rested on projecting unity, Andrew's return felt less like a homecoming and more like lighting a match near gasoline. William's protective instinct ignites. Prince William's face betrayed his feelings before any words needed speaking. As that hostile stare unfolded mere feet away, the Prince of Wales, forever the guardian, shifted almost imperceptibly, his frame positioning itself as a barrier between his wife and the source of threat. Eyewitnesses described his expression transforming like weather systems gathering, jaw muscles tightening beneath the formal mourning attire, eyes flashing with a protectiveness refined through years of defending those he loves from various forms of attack. This was no detached family member trying to ignore awkwardness. This was a husband, a father, and a future king whose tolerance for family dysfunction had reached its absolute limit. The moment, preserved in what has become an iconic photograph, showing Andrew positioned just behind the couple, captured William's subtle repositioning, his hand briefly touching Catherine's elbow in a gesture of quiet solidarity. It represented the kind of instinctual protection that has characterized him since childhood. From shielding his mother from aggressive photographers to now defending against barbs from his own extended family. Palace sources, leaking information to media outlets within a single day, painted a picture of barely contained fury. One aide close to the Wales household confided that William was absolutely livid, not just about the disrespect shown Catherine, but about the sheer audacity of turning a funeral into a personal battlefield. The service had already tested his patience. Andrew's unexpected dramatic arrival with Ferguson in tow, drawing gasps from crowds on the pavement, had established a discordant tone from the start. But the stair crossed into territory William considered sacred. William, who has shouldered the monarchy's burdens with pragmatism that sometimes borders on ruthlessness, recognized this as a final breaking point in a long series of provocations. His history with Andrew reads like a chronicle of increasing frost. The 2019 Christmas exclusion following the emergence of damaging photographs. The 2022 removal of titles that William reportedly advocated for behind closed doors. Yet, until this moment, protocol had demanded maintaining at least a surface level of civility, especially at occasions like funerals where attendants acknowledged blood connections over personal failings. That calculation had just changed permanently. As the family emerged onto the cathedral's exterior steps, William's body language communicated volumes without requiring speech. He angled his position to physically block Andrew from camera views, engaged King Charles in low, intense conversation, while Catherine composed herself with waves to well-wishers. Viral video clips, subsequently analyzed by body language specialists on morning television programs, highlighted the micro-expressions, a furrowed brow, an unusually tight grip on his order of service, the deliberate forward step that isolated his uncle from the family group. For William, this anger operated on multiple levels. It stemmed from protective instincts toward Catherine, whose grace under relentless pressure has made her the family's emotional foundation. It echoed his own deep scars, particularly the loss of Diana, amplifying his rejection of unchecked entitlement and poor judgment. And it reflected strategic calculation. Andrew's continued antics risked staining the Wales family's carefully crafted image of modern relevance and earned respect. In the car's private interior during the drive to a closed reception afterward, sources indicate William's first call went to a trusted senior advisor, immediately laying groundwork for what would become his most dramatic exercise of heir's authority yet. The heir's reaction was not impulsive, emotional outburst. It was the ignition point for a man prepared to wield his future power as a weapon, ensuring that one poorly judged glance would reverberate through palace halls for months to come. In that surge of protective anger, William didn't simply react. He recalibrated the entire family dynamic. The Yorks' isolation deepens. Prince Andrew's royal lodge, that sprawling Windsor estate of faded elegance, must now feel more like confinement than residence. William's ultimatum landed with the force of closing doors that had been barely opened, transforming Andrew's already limited access into complete social exile. No longer an occasional presence at family celebrations, Andrew faces isolation that cuts deeper than any stripped title. Christmas at Sandringham, with its generations of tradition and festive warmth, becomes a gathering he can only imagine from a distance. A calculated void that stings more sharply than public criticism. Ferguson, who has survived multiple scandals throughout her unconventional life, finds her own world constricting. Her charitable appearances and media ventures now operate under the shadow of the Wales family's frost. The pair, who have maintained their unusual closeness despite decades since their divorce, now confront a unified wall from the heir apparent, one that whispers of irrelevance and obsolescence. Financially, pressure applies in more subtle but equally effective ways. Conversations circulate about potential tenancy reviews for Royal Lodge, that 30-room property funded through sovereign resources, with suggestions floated about relocating to more modest accommodations like Frogmore Cottage, previously occupied briefly by Harry and Meghan during their short-lived return to UK duties. Andrew's already reduced income streams see no relief, while Ferguson's charitable patronages face quiet scrutiny, ensuring no association with past controversies resurfaces through donor connections. The Stair's legacy manifests as personal devastation disguised as policy adjustment. Andrew, now 65 and increasingly bitter, has reportedly complained privately about William's vendetta, viewing the exclusion as retribution for perceived loyalty to the late Queen and refusal to simply disappear. Yet his defiance, the same attitude that produced that hostile cathedral stare, now accelerates his isolation. Ferguson, managing her own health battles, provides emotional support, but even she reportedly senses the fundamental shift, confiding to friends about a family consuming itself. Publicly, the Yorks project defiance through strategic appearances at lesser events, and Ferguson's hints about forthcoming memoirs containing unvarnished perspectives. But the exile's impact is undeniable. No longer the familiar presence at significant royal occasions, Andrew becomes a historical footnote, his Windsor existence increasingly solitary. For his daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, the situation creates painful divisions. Torn between parental loyalty and their own careful positions within the broader royal framework, their relatively low-profile lives become collateral damage in this larger conflict. Beatrice's careful diplomatic endeavors face new scrutiny, while Eugenie's international connections strain under the weight of family baggage. The ultimatum's effectiveness lies in its precision. It punishes without creating spectacle, eroding influence through systematic absence. Andrew's responses, leaked through sympathetic sources about ungrateful younger generations, ring hollow against William's mandate. In this fallout, the York sphere contracts, becoming a microcosm of the monarchy's broader evolution, where continuation demands not just royal blood, but demonstrated loyalty and judgment. The Stair may have been impulsive, but its cost is measured in a dynasty's quiet dismantling, one excluded seat at family gatherings at a time. Charles caught between son and brother. King Charles III, the longtime advocate for a streamlined monarchy, now navigates its sharpest internal contradiction. Balancing brotherly affection against his son's forceful will, all while a nation watches for signs of decisive leadership. William's ultimatum placed him in an emotional vice, his brother's quiet desperation clashing with his son's steely determination. At 76, managing his own serious health challenges that have visibly aged him, Charles had envisioned a reign characterized by unity, cutting excess while preserving the institution's heart. Andrew, his sibling who once enjoyed protection through multiple scandals, represents that excess in its most problematic form. Yet blood connections linger, built from shared childhood experiences to their mother's final attempts at maintaining family cohesion. The funeral had represented Charles's attempt at extending grace, a quiet allowance for Andrew's presence at this historic Catholic service, honoring religious significance without drawing attention. But the Stair demolished that fragile accommodation, forcing Charles to confront an impossible choice: indulge Andrew and risk alienating William, the monarchy's vital future, or rebuke his brother and betray bonds formed in palace nurseries decades ago. Sources describe the post-funeral discussions as a sovereign's crucible. Charles pacing through Clarence House's formal rooms, advisors hovering uncertainly in corners. William's words, delivered with the authority of the heir apparent, carried tones of inevitability. Exile Andrew to preserve the crown's remaining credibility, or watch public trust continue eroding under renewed York-related damage. Charles, despite his reputation as a conciliator, acquiesced not from weakness, but recognition of reality. He understood his son's command of public sentiment and contemporary values. Polling data reinforces this. Substantial majorities view William as the family's future strength, while Andrew's favorability remains devastatingly low. The king's compliance manifests through strategic silence. No palace denials of the Christmas exclusion. No prominent mentions of York family members in official communications. Yet it clearly causes him pain. Charles's vision, articulated repeatedly since his accession, sought a relevant monarchy that balanced efficiency with compassion, where even wayward family members might find redemption through quiet contrition and private service. William's approach cuts far more cleanly, prioritizing public perception over olive branches, representing a generational shift from Charles's diplomatic inclinations to the Wales family's pragmatic ruthlessness. The constraint extends to practical policy. Charles resists formal eviction proceedings, citing constitutional sensitivities and family loyalty, but yields ground on event attendance, hoping Andrew's discretion might suffice going forward. Ferguson's sidelining adds particular irony, her warmth once making her a favorite among the younger generation, now classified as liability in William's calculations. For the sovereign, this represents less betrayal than reluctant passing of the baton. A recognition that the heir mirrors his own determination but tempers it with youth's impatience and intolerance for perceived weakness. Whispered conversations suggest paternal pride mixing with melancholy, Charles quietly confiding to Camilla about witnessing his son surpass him in certain aspects of leadership. In this tension, the stare's real victim emerges. The illusion of family unity, cracked by a hostile glance, awkwardly mended through William's mandate. Charles's navigation, graceful yet grudging, underscores the throne's ongoing evolution, where brotherly bonds must bend before the inexorable demands of succession planning. A monarchy transformed through confrontation. As the immediate drama settles into palace routine, Prince William's decisive action against Andrew illuminates a path forward where the monarchy systematically sheds its problematic elements, like a tree losing dead branches, emerging more focused, more protective of its core, and far more willing to establish firm boundaries. This transcends isolated family conflict, representing a preview of the Wales era, one where personal affronts to Catherine become institutional red lines and family loyalty is measured through actions rather than bloodline proximity. The implications spread in widening circles, strengthening the center while sending clear warnings to anyone at the periphery. Align with the mission or face irrelevance. For working royals, William's model promises relief, concentrating limited resources on the effective core while systematically quarantining sources of scandal. Charitable organizations once associated with Andrew pivot toward fresher representatives like Beatrice's measured engagements, but under far stricter oversight than previous generations accepted. Public sentiment, measured through post-funeral surveys and ongoing polling, largely endorses this tough love approach, with substantial majorities supporting firm action to protect the institution's relevance and credibility. Yet shadows persist alongside the applause. Andrew's marginalization risks creating martyr narratives that fuel anti-monarchist arguments about elitist infighting and outdated privilege. Across Europe, royal families in Sweden and Denmark observe warily, their own streamlining efforts having proceeded with less dramatic public conflict, pondering whether Britain's bold strokes might invite backlash that damages rather than strengthens. For Catherine, the clear beneficiary of William's protective stance, this cements her position as untouchable within the family hierarchy. Her recovery narrative now intertwined with empowerment, inspiring countless people globally to demand healthy boundaries even within gilded environments. William's assertiveness, once criticized by some as emotional distance or aloofness, now appears as effective stewardship, his refusal to tolerate dysfunction resonating as exactly what a fatigued public seeks. Speculation naturally swirls about future applications. Will this approach extend to other family tensions, potentially hardening positions in the ongoing Atlantic divide with Harry, or establishing precedents for handling any family member whose behavior threatens the institution? As Christmas approaches and Sandringham prepares its annual gathering, the York family's absence will send unmistakable messages. The Crown endures not through indulgent forgiveness of repeated failures, but through ironclad commitment to standards and consequences. William has not simply avenged a disrespectful stare. He has fundamentally redrawn the family's operational map, charting a course where duty and discipline trump dynasty's declining elements. The monarchy, tested repeatedly in recent years, now positions itself for genuine reinvention, its future trajectory painted in strokes of resolve and clear boundaries. What's your perspective, reader? Does William's bold gambit represent salvation for an institution struggling with relevance, or does it strain the very fabric that has held the monarchy together through centuries of challenge? Share your verdict in the comments below and join the ongoing conversation about a royal house being actively reforged.